I guess one of the main things was the short circuiting operators. That was a lot more work than I expected, actually. So specifically what was involved in the short circuiting operators. So we had these functions, and the functions were and or, and they were just sort of like, you could use bool colon colon and, or you could use bool colon colon or you could use these infix operators. And they were the exact same. They're infix functions. And so changing them to short circuiting. So the first thing was, it wasn't changing them to short circuiting. It was like keeping them as they were, so that people's programs didn't change, but allowing the creation of new short circuiting things. So it was, we extended the language to support those things, but then also had to like change quite a bit to how infix stuff was represented so that these operators worked the same as infix functions in the editor. So I tried to replicate it, and that went really bad. And so I was like, no, let's make these exactly the same thing so that all the UI is the same. And it was like, it was like 3 or 4 steps. It's kind of something that you think, oh, this will be trivial, I'll just like push this out. But there was like changes to the back end, changes to the front end. They had to be like rolled out in sync. So yeah, it was a little bit more than than I kind of expected, and it did lead to sort of some future niceness. So for example, I now have figured out a good way of supporting sort of like versioned infix. So the int mod function, I think we use int mod v0, and there's some weird behavior there, and we'd like to move to int mod v1. And I think we haven't released int mod v1 because it would be weird to deprecate int mod v0 and then have the operator deprecated. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch to, instead of infix functions being separate functions in the AST, having them be just like a view on the same, like on the underlying function. So if you're using an operator like mod, so percentage, that will be really int mod v0 displayed as percentage operator. And then we can have int mod v1 displayed as percentage operator as well. And when you add percentage operator, we will, future ones will be v1, old ones are v0, and can be deprecated. So that's sort of how that's come out, and allows us sort of like get a bunch of that sort of language migration stuff going.
Yeah, that makes sense. What brought for the short circuit operator, something like brought this up, right? We knew that the second part would be evaluated. So it would be, let's say, bool and
Yeah,
the second part's always evaluated even if the first part is false, right? Which isn't
that's in the old ones,
right.
yes.
That's in the old one. That's the reason that this whole effort came about. Because like Dark is uh, a generally functional language, at least is aiming to be. I guess I was a little bit surprised that it came up that we would need the short circuiting operator, at least at this stage. What brought that up? Like people doing DB functions in the second half, the second expression, or what?
I think it was just like, this is just kind of weird, and I also like had an idea for how we would implement it, and I wanted to test out that idea. Like there's a lot of Dark is surprisingly a large amount about migrations. Like I hadn't maybe realized just how much that's going to be like our big win, but like every time I use an existing framework or an existing language or whatever, and I have to deal with a migration, I realize like this is really fucked.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost kind of like, like you need a full-time person just doing npm upgrades in your code base, or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's tooling, but the tooling's not safe, and like Dependabot or something like that, you can't just click and just maybe it'll be fine. So as I deal with kind of maintenance of the rest of the code base, it becomes clearer and clearer that perhaps this is like a major feature, that like migrations are a major feature, keeping things working for people. I always considered a major feature, but I hadn't maybe realized just like how big migrations would be as part of that.
Yeah. I guess we've experimented a little bit with like using contributor settings now to like have the user be part of the migration.
Yeah,
Um, but certainly long term is going to be like automation to some extent
yeah.
and like
And
A/B testing and
yeah, and this time I added some commands, and I added some like um just like a little more sort of visual thing. Um, since Ocean is currently working on the doc box, I didn't want to like go further with that, but I would like to have a button um to implement that command show up in the doc box, just like convert to thing.
mm-hmm.
And after that, I would like a thing in the sidebar, a sort of a list of deprecations, a button to do all deprecations, um, that sort of thing. Just sort of like advance the tooling built on top of what we have, and make it like a little more automated.
Hmm. So I suppose that would extend into packages when packages become a thing.
Yeah.
Is that authors of the packages could write their own migrations from like one version or function version to another, or how that?
I think getting there is it's a journey.
Yeah.
So I think when we have good UI for it, we can sort of like, we can look at it more like right now our version upgrades are a little bit janky. They're nice, but if you switch from version 0 to, or if you rename a function, right, which is how you do the switch from version 0 to version 1 or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
um we will often get it right. We will match types up, we will match like the name of parameters up. But it's not like we know we will get this right. It's like we have some decent heuristics, but the heuristics might break in an unexpected way. So I think that adding ways for people to specify them, like we don't necessarily want people to be able to like for package managers to be able to like run arbitrary dark code as part of that migration process. So it might be something where where we handle 3 or 4 of like very standard ways of doing it. Maybe you specify what happens to each parameter, it goes away, it stays the same, etc. Um, and then um, have some sort of extra ways of manipulating the AST where the user can see what it is going to be changed into. Um, you know, with packages, you want to include some trust and that sort of thing as well. And how many people have done this migration safely before? Here, look at the code in the migration, and you can be sure, oh, it doesn't do anything interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think there's like, I think we need to get there piecemeal, and that was actually why I was excited about this. I was like, this this has a nice end to it. So let's see where pushing this a little bit further along gets us.
Yeah. Cool. That's great. So yeah, a lot of effort was in that short circuiting operator. You also did a fair amount with like I don't know, maybe cloud run stuff. I don't see it here, but I guess that kind of bled out between the two
Yeah,
months.
it didn't lead anywhere. Like it didn't ship. But what I was doing, this was sort of towards the end of, I think, December, around Christmas time. I was looking through Google Docs release notes, or Google Cloud release notes, and I realized that they had this like new managed certificate thing. And we have a separate path for our customs domain thing. And the separate path brings you to this Nginx proxy that we run ourselves, that has a slightly different behavior. So like it'll have slightly different headers to the normal way of coming in, the built with dark thing. And it also has this unfortunate feature where where you have to change the CNAME to dark custom domain. So previously, whereas it's a little more natural to use built with dark, and we'd like to get to darklang.io, but one thing at a time. And so there's this opportunity to just like remove this path, remove this like product feature. Sorry, not product feature. Remove this implementation of the product feature and just move to something that's much, much simpler, where as well, it would be much easier to add an editor backend function to do it. Because right now, it's like add this thing to Kubernetes and wait and call this script. And I'm like very reluctant to expose that to an API.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas, an actual Google Cloud API where we can give it a key that's like extremely, all that you can do is add this cert, is a much like safer security surface. So the prospect of like removing all this, removing a bunch of tech debt stuff, never having to think about Nginx again, never having to think about Cert Manager again. And that's also the last thing that keeps us in Kubernetes, right? And so we can start to move to Cloud Run. And so I started experimenting with Cloud Run, and I realized that like actually the performance here really isn't very good. Which the Cloud Run people think is not how it should be. So I emailed or Twitter and then email some people who work on Google Cloud Run, and where they're like performance should be good. You should be having performance that's like roughly similar to what you get in Kubernetes. And I think that there's two problems here. One is that we use like really good CPUs on our Kubernetes cluster. We use AMD Ryzen, whatever
Line,
this.
yeah.
Yeah, just like top of the line, very, very performant. There's another problem where we, I think our DBs go through different paths. So our
Like network paths.
different network paths, and I think that the initial Cloud Run setup went through like the public internet. And I'm not super clear on networking, but I guess it goes over there to come back here.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in our GKE setup, it just like goes like to the thing that's in the same data center, right? It's 1 millisecond latency or something. So that's the other thing. And that's probably the biggest performance thing. And I needed to enable a private IP, which needs to, which will lead to a restart of the DB. So I don't really want to do that, but I guess it'll only be a minute, but it's not a great. Yeah. So we have these kind of issues with it, but it's, it looks pretty promising. Like I think we could get it down to 2, possibly 3 services, whereas now we have like 11.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, and that all aligned or I guess overlapped with some work I was pursuing regarding Q Worker. I was trying to figure out quality of service with that. We've run into some issues where um, we're basically one person can hog the Q Worker. So looking to see how we can leverage more of Google services to support the quality service. So that kind of overlapped there. So a lot of my month as well was pursuing that. For now, it's on rest. But that was a fun adventure. But yeah, having the Q Worker partially handled in Google Cloud stuff would be great because we have a lot of stuff
So
managed yourself with that.
one thing there is that the Q Worker is much less latency sensitive. So like the fact that that would be a bit slower is maybe not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Like maybe that's a fine thing.
So maybe that's the thing to start with since it's
Yeah, because like
less risky.
the HTTP thing, like if it doubles, then like things start timing out and it gets bad. But the Q Workers, like,
Yeah. So maybe that's
although
stuff there.
do we have a? I don't remember whether we have a timeout on the Q Worker. Like, do we time things out after 30 seconds or something?
There is a timeout. I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
sure we could find it quick.
yeah, it's the sort of thing where where um users with like slow server like things can get slow sometimes, and so slow moving to broken isn't great.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the timeout is, but I know we have one.
Yeah. Um, I was looking at Cloud Scheduler, which is a Google product,
Hmm.
and it had been my hope to sort of like replace our cron handlers with this thing.
Hmm.
And then I realized that Cloud Scheduler costs 3 cents per rule per month.
3 cents per rule. Okay, so if anyone were to have something like on Tuesday at 4 p.m. run this
Well,
cron.
just any cron at all would be 3 cents per rule
Right. Well, when you say rule, like I'm imagining that. Um,
per handler, basically.
oh, per handler. Okay, I was thinking like if a bunch of people also all had crons of on a daily basis do this, then we could put them in one bucket. But that's not the case. They'd all have to
No,
be
no. I mean,
separate.
I think we will have to do something like that because I think that it's not super tenable to have a very easy way to charge us money.
Hmm.
Um, like what we've 8,000 users. If they all had a cron job, that would be not that much money. It'd be like $24 or whatever a month. Not a huge deal, but like
Doesn't scale
scale
well.
10, scale 100, starts to be bad.
Yeah. Huh. That's an interesting pricing metric.
So it might be something where we start by doing that, but then migrate away from it. But I think it's not really valuable to migrate to something that like where you're already seeing the migration away from it.
Yeah.
Um, the thought I had was just like we can use one rule to trigger the per minute thing, um, and then we can get like uh, we can scale the cron checker.
What do you mean the permanent thing?
So the issue is that we have this cron checker, right?
Hmm.
And it's just running a hot loop on the database to see like what should it do. And the problems there are one, the hot loop, two, the service exists, but three, the service is a little shaky because every time we do a deployment, we don't want to like run these things twice, run the cron things twice.
Hmm.
So we don't run two of them, and there's no coordination, right? It's just using the database. So we turn it off and then turn it on again, um, using like a Kubernetes deployment pattern. And we don't, if something goes wrong, then we have turned the old one off. Whereas if something goes wrong with one of the other things, then we don't, then the old ones don't get turned off and continue working.
I see.
So if we fuck up a deploy, then the pager goes off versus the other ones. If we fuck up a deploy, nothing happens. And so if we have Cloud Scheduler triggering this every 1 minute thing, then we can have two of them. And yeah,
Cool. So that's kind of
I've
a
been
lot
thinking
of
a lot about our infrastructure setup in the
yeah.
last few.
Yeah, I guess I'll just go into some other thing I've done in the past month, or I guess last month. We run into issues. Speaking of migrations, um, where we're basically clients become out of date, and certain problems can arise from that. And so we have some degree of tracking, where we've had some degree of tracking of what clients are on which version, but it's been
I think you need
um,
to scroll the release notes.
what was that?
You're on the
In
wrong,
the
showing that in the release notes.
sure. Um, where is that?
Ah, did we not include it? Hmm.
I think as I think the actual release of what I'm talking about may be the next month, but this is something that
Oh,
we've done as part of that. I was just kind of I guess leading up to that, but so we'll speak on it more next month. But the point is that we clients can become out of dated, um, and it becomes useful to have clients refresh themselves after a certain point of time. So some work towards that was having an internal function that basically exposes the git hash of the latest deploy, so we can leverage that in the front end. So yeah, I guess next month will be the actual uh,
hmm.
the other half of that.
It'll be interesting to see the graphs. Because the old graphs were like, oh, this one stays around for a while, this one stays around for a while, this one stays around. It'll be interesting that like, oh, these are all gone. They all go to
Yeah,
zero upon each release.
yeah, that'd be nice. That'd be nice. We can continue to tighten on that because right now there's only like the architecture page, and I think if you're viewing like a package function page, those two will automatically refresh. But if you're in a handler,
Mhm.
if your cursor is here or something like that, let's say we were in a larger handler and your
Yeah,
cursor was like halfway through, we don't want to refresh someone's page because then they could lose context of where they are. So
yeah,
there's a lot of places we don't do that properly, but that'll be a good push for us to actually maintain that position
yeah.
either in local
I'd
storage or
wager
URL or something.
90%. I'd wager 90% can be refreshed as is. I think the current rules will get us like 90%
Yeah,
of the way there.
because most of the time you're just on the architecture page.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I guess the
Yeah.
easiest extension will be check if you're in position 0 or if you're, focused on a handler, but otherwise just not in the code.
I I think the main issue we'll have for the next iteration is that often when you refresh your if you have a cursor somewhere and you refresh, we're not like really good at like getting you back to the exact right place. Like sometimes the autocomplete will show the wrong thing or
Hmm.
and people rarely refresh, so like it's no big deal. And you can just like, you can go to main and it goes away and then you can go back to it or whatever. But if we're gonna like refresh four people, then we'll need to get that a bit more right.
Yeah. Let's think.
What else we got there?
Yeah,
So
language history library. You've implemented a bunch of character functions, and we've updated the um, a little bit of the language details relevant to that. We have just a little bit more character support. Still no great character support for what you would expect of be able to hit like a single
yeah,
tick, but uh,
yeah,
work towards that has been good. Um, I've been as so we have a script that's used to generate these change logs, and as part of that, I think I can bring that up safely. Yeah, there's nothing secret there. As part of that, I do a few of these things where I have this filter that I write, and then I basically want to split this into two lists of like, oh, I want to ignore the PRs that are dependent about PRs because there's no reason for us to report to users on those, and then I have others, and I keep on partitioning these lists, so I was reaching for a list partition function. Um, so I wrote it, and then I realized that it's kind of useless because the result
yeah.
of it is a tuple, and we don't have tuple deconstruction. So you can't
Uh-huh.
you can't do something like a let a comma b equals at this
But
point.
we do have decent tuple functions, do we? Like you
We
can do get first, get second, tuple two.
Yeah, but it's still going to result in the same like vertical space. I was kind of hoping for
Yeah,
something to just flatten this out and just be easier to read. Right now, it's like, oh well, there's no like good separation, so I have these little hacks here.
What? Why are you partitioning instead of like what? I would have thought the filter is the right kind of.
Well, there's like a few sections I want. So the depend upon thing I could have just filtered out. This could have, I guess, been one line lower. But later on, there's like a few sections that I wanted where I wanted the ones with it explicit changelog to be
Yeah.
shown first, and the ones without explicit changelog to be later. So I was intending to like have different sections output at the end. Uh, where exactly that's represented, but and maybe that idea has been lost, but I basically wanted like a record of here are the different kinds of PRs that came
Mm-hmm.
as a roll of things. So the partition was towards that. So anyway, I wrote that function and then turned out I can't use it yet. But I've been like in the past few months working on tuples in terms of having tuple deconstruction. So hopefully this is the month that'll get out.
Yeah, tuple is sort of a grand project that like touches many things that you're going to fix along the way.
Yeah.
Um, It's nice to have those.
Yeah, another one that uh, we'll see if we get to it, but user functions, uh, right now, the return types they have like just the basic types, but then dictionaries and lists they're just flat. They don't tell you what types they actually are. So
Hmm.
uh, that'll be a nice aiming to support tuples will be a nice way to force me to handle these kind of things,
Yeah.
which in turn will probably be extend fluid uh, to do that, which will be a whole project.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
anyone who doesn't know what fluid is basically the tooling we use to support all um, the keystrokes within this code box. So
Yeah.
it,
It's just like the name of the more modern structured editor that we use.
yeah,
We have, whereas we also have the old structured editor that we use still in some various places.
yeah. So have been working a little bit on tuples. We'll continue to do tuples. But yeah, it's a big project that takes months and it touches everything for sure.
Yeah. Um, okay, so editor improvement, styling of settings invites. This is another big project that like it sounds like this is nothing, but like I'm pretty excited about this.
Mm-hmm.
So Ocean is working on this, and really it's sort of a journey to fully componentize our front end, to use Tailwind everywhere, to make it easier to use forms and all these things. And because we don't use a sort of a standard framework like React, we're using Rescript-T. It's a very low level framework, and so usually we'd get to use a framework which would make it which would automatically have animations and validation and that sort of thing. And so this is part of like making sure that we actually have all that stuff and making sure that it kind of works and making it pretty along the way. So we've been redoing all of settings and the sidebar and the sort of editor drop down, or sorry, the user icon, the avatar drop down,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of modernizing those things. Um, and then afterwards, I think we will start adding more settings and adding more kind of options and and using the fonts, right? The um
Yeah,
using not just mono font everywhere.
yeah. Before like everything in the editor was the monospace font, and
Yeah.
recently there's been efforts to pretty things up. Maybe that's not the. There's a little
Yeah.
bit of that in here, but this one is probably
Um,
a
yeah.
better
So
representation.
where we kind of it is very difficult to use a non-mono font, because of some like global, very high specificity CSS rules we have. Um, and the CSS in general is like difficult to change. It's difficult to know what you're going to break. Um, so those are standard reasons of switching to Tailwind. And I'm excited about like not having fear about like adding some, you know, changing the height of something, not breaking something else.
Yeah, yeah. Tailwind is reducing the risk that way. So lots of good editor styling improvements and just like kind of not even just styling, but more architecture in terms of just bettering us so we don't have to have that danger looming.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's the sort of thing once you sort of settle into the idea that like things are broken, in an area, you just like your brain blocks out that area and then you never think about like what we could do better there, or just like it's just not an avenue that you can use to like improve experience or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean this is kind of the same with the tuple stuff and trying to change, um trying to bring handlers into fluid as part of it, or trying to bring function definitions into fluid as part of it, because those things feel a little like closed off. They feel like here be dragons. Um, that's kind of one of the main reasons I'm trying to like kill off a bunch of our technical debt, even though it's not like immediately user facing. It does prevent us a lot from doing user facing things like the what I was saying about like cert manager, right? We have never thought about how users are going to be able to specify their own certs, right? Right now they go to us on Discord and they tell us, right, I would like this cert. And then I run a script and it waits, if I'm asleep, it waits, a day or whatever. Whereas like if you trace the root cause there, the root cause is that we wrote this in Kubernetes and we're afraid to like expose that. And if we weren't so afraid, then we can have the feature. So anything that we're like afraid of touching, we kind of have to kill all those off.
Speaking of thing that is afraid of touching, Traces have been living in her DB for ages, and now they're slowly not being in their DB, which is great.
No, that's not true. They are
No.
they are still all going in the
Well,
DB,
okay,
but
some opt
there's
away.
one handler that has it enabled.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason that these aren't fully in the DB is that the reason that these aren't fully in cloud storage is that you can still press an execute handler button, or you can press an execute function button. So a little play button, or the little circular button in the top right of the handler that runs the whole handler.
Yeah.
And so they go to the database. So yes, that one exactly. So I suppose theoretically we could kind of store all of them and so anyway, there's a plan. There's a plan. I'm calling them sort of like patches, to sort of like patch them onto the thing and add those in storage. And we are going to do that. But it will. I think I need to do that before I enable it globally. So it's a thing that moves, but it is not moving as quickly as I had hoped. I guess I started that in June. I started talking about it in 2020.
Well, it's making good progress, I think. Give yourself some credit.
PRs are getting merged,
Yeah.
so that is like that is a
Yeah.
good step.
Well, I think like you had a good. I don't know. I recognized a big spell of like we have like a big plan, right? And I think
Yeah,
that's like the hurdle for a lot of these projects. Like these big
yeah,
projects is like, okay, well we have a big plan. We know it's going to take months, but like there are steps to take versus like
yeah,
some things are you can get so blocked on what the hell do I do that
yeah,
nothing gets
yeah.
done. So
I
it's
mean,
it's
I
like
will say that like it is connected, it is wired up,
yeah.
and it does work, which it didn't when it shipped, but follow up. And that's kind of a big step here. Like I kind of think the next steps, um, they could be done in days if they're as easy as I think, but like, usually they're not, but like the DevOps is done, it's really just code that's left. Which I don't know is easier, but we'll see.
Cool. Yeah, we have a few smaller things internal. Um, yeah, this is nice. Standard library functions that take lambdas have default names provided for lambdas. That's a nice one.
We
Like DD query is one.
we statically prove that, right? I think like it's not possible for it to not have a value name, to not have a name there.
I believe you, but I forget the context there.
Yeah, I think part of that was it wasn't just like adding lambdas, it was like a assertion that
Ah,
we had them added.
yes. Yeah, there's this check that checks to see if something's a function, and I think based on that, it'll maybe that was it.
There we go. No, maybe that's not it.
I think with args. function deploy. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong thing. Oh no, yeah, I was looking at the wrong PR. Sorry, I clicked full
Oh
into the
no,
wrong thing.
no.
Okay,
I think that was it.
I'll
So
skip.
go back. So I mean, we have an assertion there. So assertion make with args not called on T function. So
Okay,
that's not the one. It's the other one. It's that make is called on a T function. It should be so make with args is the one that has a name, and the assertion. If you scroll up,
mm-hmm.
previous assertion there. That assertion there on line 387 is you're calling the thing without a name on a thing that needs a name.
I see. Well, that's great because then the lambdas won't be just like value in all cases, right? I think that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
That's a good one. Besides that, I'm not seeing anything big in terms of. I mean, December's
Yeah,
historically a
wasn't it
slower month.
super wasn't it super user facing month? I'm a little sort of surprised at how much sort of still internal facing stuff there is to be done to get things on the right path. Like we get small wins out of them, but we're still kind of unblocking a lot of like I think like the styling of the settings, it sounds so dumb and like it's absolutely not, that interesting for users, but it represents a bunch of debt that needed to get done before we could really do anything at an appreciable speed.
Yeah. The ability to add a setting right now is much easier than it was 6 months ago.
Yeah,
Since we revamped how the settings, maybe 9 months, I forget when that
yeah,
the
yeah,
native factor happened. But much
yeah.
easier.
Um, yeah, so I have a bunch. Like I was looking at the projects. It's a Monday, so I did it. I did the projects. I made my list of projects again today, and there's still a bunch of like, if we get rid of all this trash, then things will be better. Um, things will be cheaper. Things will be faster. Things will be faster to iterate on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. What about your so I think we pretty much covered the patch release. So in terms of like
Yeah.
current projects and where your brain's at going forward, something
So
to
yeah, I recently sort of I started writing down what projects I'm working on, and where they are. Are they on the back burner? Are they sort of active? I'm doing some security things here, so at the moment. So those are kind of top of mind. And uh the next sort of big thing for me is I need to get uh like there's two big projects, right? There's the package manager and there's the homepage, and they're big projects in the sense that they are things that are sort of like driving us, or that are intended to be like small things that get released over the way until they're sort of done. So there's kind of two big reasons for them. So one is I think the company positioning is off. And we don't talk about what the company is, and that's a sort of a requirement around making dark sustainable. So making making it possible to earn money.
Mhm.
Because we could just like throw up a pricing page, and maybe we should throw up like a sponsorship page or something like that. That might be easy to do, but we also need to tell people about what we are, because that's not really what we do on the homepage right now. So getting our roadmap out there, getting our positioning right, all that sort of thing. And with that, getting our sort of user journey right. Someone discovers the homepage, they hear about Dark, they get to the homepage, and then what comes next? They sign up. Everything from like lifecycle marketing to tutorials and that sort of thing sort of flows into that. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is package manager. The package manager is basically what it will take for Dark to be like really, really good for people. I think I've been saying this for a couple of years, but I haven't been working on it. And the reason that I haven't been working on it is that I feel that we don't want to get stuck with arbitrary old code that we want to get rid of. I don't want nulls to be in there. I don't want like, old dicts to be in there, like things that we want to get rid of, that we want the path to get rid of. I don't want like deprecated functions in there because that will be another dependency. So
Like the language has to be quote unquote good enough or something until we unleash packages. Is that the
yeah, that's roughly it. Like it, or I mean, it could be just that like we just don't allow you to upload a package with stuff we don't like in there. Maybe that's the path.
Hmm.
Um, rather than having to solve everything in the language before we get there. But yeah.
Cool. So actively on lots of security stuff and kind of thinking towards those things. Do you think you'll be like working on?
Actively on that and traces. So traces matter because we end up spending a lot of money because traces are in the wrong place, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of these like absurdly long dependency chains that to save a bunch of money, we need to migrate our database, but we can't migrate our database because some of the tables don't have primary keys. We can't add primary keys because because that will involve downtime on some of the tables. But we don't need those tables if we switch to traces. So if we switch to traces, then we can stop using those tables, then we can do the migration, then we can save the money.
Yeah.
And then the new DB can have a private IP exposed so that we can switch to Cloud Run.
Yeah. There's like there's so many task graphs that just so many
Yeah.
dependency chain task graphs to.
Yeah. And it's sort of absurd. Like, we could, we could probably get around that if we had a day's downtime or, maybe a couple of hours downtime or something like that. But like a couple, having hours of downtime is the sort of thing that can easily turn into days of downtime. And I feel that the sort of like, in a sense that the company culture that we have is like not emergencies. It's, we take things slowly and methodically, and we don't like manufacture awful
Anxiety.
situations
Yeah.
for ourselves. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm happy to not have to deal with downtime and hot fixes and such.
Yeah.
Never fun.
And the sort of thing like maybe, but there's a marked difference between a minute downtime and 3 hours where we're rushing to get it done to hit our arbitrary deadline, and then we don't hit it because there's something unanticipated. Then do we go back? Do we go forward? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. That will turn my hair gray, and I have no plans for that.
Cool. Yeah, I am focused largely on HTTP client right now. The current HTTP client is bad in a number of ways. It does a lot of things without you asking it to. Like it interprets your content headers, and you can't use requests. You can't use like a non-text textual request or response bodies. It breaks on a few things, and you don't have full control. So a while ago, drafted a new base HTTP client. There's just like proof of concept and didn't have really much testing around it. So lately, I've been just backfilling a lot of tests on it, which have fortunately revealed a few things that I think I want to tweak about the HTTP client. So working on that, backfilling a lot of tests, it takes a lot of time. I forgot how many test cases there are for those kind of things. It's like a little function with 3 parameters, but lots of things that can go wrong.
I have some questions
Yeah.
about that. So we have our deprecated thing, and now we have this sort of like experimental thing.
We have a deprecated thing.
And the experimental thing, we have deprecated built in as a thing, and we have experimental being a setting in the checkbox.
Yeah.
Do we want to move like it feels like deprecated could have pre-release stuff. So I'm imagining in particular that like
You want to,
you make a new version of the Stripe package, right? The new version of the Stripe package should, like, you don't want it to you want to test it, right? You want users to test it before you ship it. And so like, what is the pre-deprecated thing?
yeah, you want to like almost rebrand deprecated as release status or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So like that seems like a great idea, and I've definitely had that thought before. My question then becomes, okay, let's say we've done that and you're in the editor, and like, you know, you can't work invites right now with HTTP client, and it's a pain. And I
Yeah.
can imagine users immediately start using it, and they depend on it. And
Yeah.
and maybe it's not a huge deal, but I have this fear like, oh well, if it's in beta version and we change something,
Yeah.
um, then what? How do we prevent users from depending on this thing where we don't want to like maintain this thing that's
Yeah.
experimental?
Yeah. I mean, um and like if we extend that a little bit further, right? So suppose there is a new version of the Stripe thing and people agree to it. And so it's not us, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the user who has created the Stripe package, another user who's using the Stripe package. What is the mechanism that we can provide for for them to say this package is going away, is
Yeah.
changing, is something.
I think it's easier in the package world because you
It
can
is
just
easier in the
clone their
package world.
function into user space.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's true. Right. Yeah, you can say this is going away and you're using this. Uh I think it's not that simple because there's dependencies that go with it and types and but okay, let's say that it's much easier. At the very least, it's just data that's in the database.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we're saying we would like to remove this core thing. Um, I mean, I think it needs a release process. It needs a discussion. Sorry, it needs a contract with the user for what this means. So like we can say this is experimental. Experimental means that it will go away with 1 week's notice, and you will get an email,
Mm-hmm.
and you are expected to change it within 1 week. And if you don't, maybe your code won't work. We don't care. And I think part of that contract would be that we don't leave stuff in experimental status too long. We don't tell users to use experimental stuff if we don't feel confident in it, or if we're not happy with it. Like, it's very easy like to, support tells people about this undocumented workaround, and then like, the product team that is working on that is like, holy shit, this was not intended to be like listed on the docs page as the way to achieve this thing. So yeah, we would need to be like good about that.
Hmm. So maybe we're at the point where it makes sense. Like a lot of our projects, we kind of hit a point where we need to take a detour in this other path. Do you think that HTTP client is at a point where it makes sense to not necessarily HTTP client, but I think we've probably both been reaching for an experimental flag and like a way to deal
Mm.
with this. So it is probably
I,
worth iterating through. Is email the best way, or how do we manage this?
I think a rule of threes, or maybe rule of twos, like I wouldn't do it here.
Hmm.
I would say here we can see that it would have been useful, and so like, you know, we can see what we would have learned. And then next time something comes up, maybe, we'll have seen enough that we can think
Yeah,
about it more.
I have next one. The HP handlers. Those are also a thing where someone could depend
But
on an HP handler.
yes, I mean that's not going to be an experimental setting thing. That's going to be its own, that's not going to fit into a framework. That's going to be a carefully handheld artisan migration.
Yeah.
What are the things that we're worried about with the HTTP client, the base HTTP client?
Uh, there's nothing like particular right now. I mean, the one thing that's sort of blocking is the I'm trying to think. No recall. I'll have to look at my. There's a few test cases that were failing that weren't getting what I expected.
But are
Um,
there like are there structural issues? Like we're not super clear about what to do with X.
I suppose not at this point. Going through and backfilling the test is answering a lot of the questions that I did have.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't think so. I think we're going to have to release a version 0 that doesn't have tuples as input for request headers, and then v1 when tuples are out can have tuples as headers. Um, so let me back up.
So we would like a list of tuples as request headers, and we is that the main issue, whether to use dicts or
Uh,
tuples?
yeah, I wouldn't say it's an issue per se, but like, so right now the function definition has it so that the headers parameters are a list of string tuples. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if you were to use those functions, then it kind of forces you to have the experimental flag of allow tuples to be clicked. And it feels really unintuitive to have to go to contributor settings, click that box, and then suddenly you have this base HTTP request function available. That seems really unintuitive. And they could look at it in contributor docs or something like that.
I mean, should we enable tuples as a like they work. It's just not a complete feature.
Yeah,
Like we're not worried about it going wrong.
yeah. I mean, the structure data structure is not going to change or anything.
I mean,
They're just really clunky.
we have characters, and characters are very incomplete. You can't use them in a bunch of ways. You can't even specify them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, maybe it's fine for tuples to be released. So, yeah. Yet another dependency chain.
Yeah. Um,
I actually I have a question around tuples.
mhm.
Um, if users, it's very easy for people to think. I think people experiment with like putting brackets around things all the time when the precedent stuff goes wrong. Um, is it easy to believe that you're going down that path? Sorry, if you're trying to specify precedents and you accidentally wander into tuples because we use the parentheses, um, how does that go? Is it good, bad, indifferent?
Right now, I believe it's generally good. I'll open up a Scratch. Actually,
I would
there's
have been
no Scratch.
unsurprised by any word you said there. Like if you said, I believe it's generally bad, it's,
Yeah, I do believe it's generally good. So right now, if I have some data right now and I hit left parentheses, it's not going to wrap it in a tuple. It just
uh-huh.
kind of eats it. Only in
Oh,
a
okay.
only in a blank. I have the setting off right now, but the point is that only in a blank will the tuple really come about, and it's always going to show you the comma. So
Yeah. So,
yeah, it
no.
just kind
Okay.
of it just eats your keystroke, which is potentially frustrating when you do want to, you know, create like a block of logic. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but
It wouldn't be the
it,
worst if we told people why we're eating their keystrokes or something, but different
yeah,
issue.
yeah, that's something that'd be a great thing to fix at some point, though. Just the ability to create blocks like that. Um, just have parentheticals, because I know like
Mhm.
even like yeah all the time I'm looking for that, but um, yeah, one way to do it is with parentheses, another way is with indents, but there's trade-offs there.
Another ways to do indents for
Yeah,
what?
so I'm trying to think. So what's an example of a place where you want to create a parenthetical? So um,
Fizzbuzz is a good example. So it's like 1 mod 15 equals 0. Sorry, well, but yeah, same diff.
Yeah.
So this is broken because um the what I think we're doing I mod a bool. Where
I
did that
did
go?
that. Yeah. One. Yeah, but basically we're getting the operations out of order.
Yeah,
I was gonna show the AST, but yeah, it's like it's doing this and then it's doing this and
yeah.
it's awkward. So if I could like highlight this and then hit something, I don't know what the magical keystroke is, but something to wrap these two. I mean,
Well,
you
so
could do Control S and like wrap
we
in.
actually do have a plan around this. So we have code written. It was written like 2 years ago. I think it, it's not in Rescript, it's in OCaml, but like it, the you could apply it in some way.
Yeah.
Um, and it will show the parentheses for things, and it doesn't um like it's not like contextual, so like it just shows every parentheses, but I think it wouldn't be much to switch it to only show the uh don't show parentheses for nesting 0, only for nesting 1. I think it would not be too hard.
Mm-hmm.
um so then the idea is to have par edit style, so par edit being the editing mode for Lisps and closures. And what you can do there is, when you have parentheses, you can sort of like pull more things in or less things or whatever. And so the idea is kind of like that there'd be a keystroke to like, move the parentheses over to the previous thing,
Hmm.
swap around the order. And I think other structured editors have come up with good solutions there. So like, I think we can just like copy what people do. But that bit is not designed, but the extension of fluid to display those is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something you did actually makes it like enables it. Um, Resizing on copy or something like that. So that was
Ah,
why AST refs exist in the first place,
yeah.
because these were a thing where like we find, this is probably the first time where the width became variable when you were sort of like backspacing through stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Cool. By the way, handlers can start with a number. I didn't know they could do that.
Oh yeah.
Might be a bug.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I don't think there's anything particularly blocking on HTTP client stuff right now. I think the problem most likely was that I hadn't backfilled all the testing, and so the confidence wasn't there.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
so I think I'm good there. Uh, I think I think it's probably fair to release tuples. They're certainly stable in terms of functionality.
Mhm.
They're clunky, but I guess clunky's better than missing.
Yeah. With the HTTP clients, there's probably like a couple of areas where, like when we built the old HTTP client, it was very much like, just keep it working in the same way as the old one.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the base one will have certain things removed, and we want to expand to more things. So like HTTP 3, the headers should always be lowercase, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe response headers should be normalized. And errors should go through. I mean, I think we talked about all these things, but
Yeah, and
um,
all those things are true.
yeah, and there's probably not extensive testing on those things. That was what I was getting at.
Uh,
So we probably want to brainstorm a little bit on like what didn't we really test,
yeah.
um, and maybe a little bit also on like what magic things does the .NET HTTP client do below the scenes.
Yeah. And how do we get around that? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if HTTP client in .NET has a similar thing where it has like the shiny one and then the simpler one under it. I mean, we don't want to get to writing like our own HTTP protocol, or like, something based on like TCP or sockets, but maybe there's like, maybe there's something that's like a little lower level.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
At least not now.
Sorry.
At least not now. Like, do you imagine ever supporting raw TCP, or is it all HTTP?
Oh yeah, someday, but no, not not now for sure. Yeah, there'd be a lot of problems with TCP, but like I see no reason that we wouldn't support it.
Plus,
Excuse me.
anyway, HTTP client and that base client, whatever we want to call it, is like the main thing on my mind right now. Tuples are always on mind. Hoping to get some good work on down to that. Rollbars are not going to Discord yet, and that's been bugging me. So I'd love to resolve that now, so I can uninstall Slack finally.
Yeah,
I
that
like
that
I keep Slack open just for the Rollbars channel, which is a private channel.
there's also builds. I wouldn't mind when you're doing that to move to enable role bars to be public in the channel.
Okay.
So like maybe to not include any context so that we can discuss them in context
Yeah,
in the channel.
yeah, that's fair. Just make it so like they have very little detail to them. Make sure you don't
I mean,
skip it.
maybe the only detail they have is the number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. Anyway, and the final thing that's kind of on my mind, at least for the shorter term, is we have these two flaky integration tests that we've commented out. And we're trying to figure out
Yeah.
why they're flaky. I have no idea yet. I know they have like they share one thing in common. They use the same helper function that we have for use in Playwright, but not sure if like analysis is flaky or what the deal is there.
Yeah. I mean, they are sort of the same that they do renames in DB. So one alternative is to just like redo this in Fluid and then they go away. Or at least the problem goes away. We switch to a more appropriate, um not more appropriate, a new problem, a test that we actually want to maintain instead of like a test for something that's going to go away.
Yeah. I think those are pretty much all the things in my mind, at least for short term. Yeah, I've abandoned Q worker stuff for now. Um,
Yeah. I guess the other thing that's being worked on is continuation of expanding the client. So we have a new engineer working with us, Ocean, and she is working largely um, on the clients and expanding what actually like really like fixing a lot of the sort of janky things, and putting some thought into like the UI and the UX of things, like getting primarily getting the broken stuff less broken, but opportunistically taking wins where they can go. And I think once kind of like large projects like switching to Tailwind are done, then there'll be a lot of opportunity to like um take to do like larger user facing redos of things, like tooltips in particular are one that are probably going to be coming soon.
mm,
We 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 don't really provide much contextual information on things, and that's something that we really can do, that like it's a really big win compared to lots of languages, that we can you can mouse over an integer and be like, this is an integer, it's a 64-bit, or tuples or whatever, whatever people don't understand, they can just like literally cursor through the thing and be like, oh, I understand how this code works now.
mm,
um so the UI for that is sort of missing.
yeah.
um that's somewhere where I hope to go.
Sounds good. I think that's it for me. We'll continue to be plugging away.
Yeah, that's it for me as well. Hoping to get the storage done, and once the storage is done, I can really sit on the sort of homepage as my or the story of how people learn and experience Dark as my major focus.
Cool. Sounds like a good change of pace.
Yeah. Obviously, with the back end or in the back of my mind being like, how can I kill Kubernetes?
Yeah.
Not for everyone, just for us.
No, for
Well, I suppose, I mean, the goal of Dark in a certain sense is to
yeah.
be like, okay, you don't need to learn Kubernetes, but you know, it's not go crazy.
Yeah. It's next year's goal.
Cool.
Cool. All right. Thanks.
All right, later.